Namaste. Good evening, India, and good morning, America. My name is Preeti Chaudhary, and you are watching Corporate Spotlight Diversity Dialogue with a focus on Informatica Inc. With me today is Kristan Gainey Keene. She is the Senior Director of Diversity, and it is an absolute honor and my pleasure to welcome her and get this conversation started. So with her into the stream, it is once again namaste to this edition of Corporate Spotlight, Spotlight on Informatica Inc. with Kristan Gainey Keene, who is the Senior Director, Diversity. And we will be talking exclusively about women in STEM, her life journey, her story as a young girl to where she is today. Welcome, Kristan. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm very well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Let's get the ball rolling, Kristan. I'm all excited and eager to hear more and know more about you. So to get a context set for this conversation, could you please help us understand a little bit more of who you are, a bit of your background, your family, so that we can get tidbits and lessons and learnings from this next 1 hour that we are going to be together. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. I'm happy to. I was born in Oakland, California. I'm the third generation of my family to be in Oakland. It's in the Bay Area. It's about 20 minutes away from San Francisco. A lot of people know San Francisco, so it's close. And it's called the East Bay, and it's a little bit less. How would I put it? It's a little less glamorous than San Francisco. So it's a little bit more down to earth and real. So yeah, I was born there. And I had grandparents in the same town as me. And then I had grandparents that were located on a completely different coast on the East Coast of the United States in a state called South Carolina. So I spent a lot of time with one set of grandparents because my parents worked pretty hard, and then we'd spend summers with the other grandparents. So it was a interesting juxtaposition of people, very, very different sets of grandparents that taught us lessons. So do you want me to just go on, or do you want to ask a question?
Yes, I do want to know what were those childhood influences that shaped you into who you are, and those grounding values. So I know you've spoken about 2 sets of grandparents and then obviously your parents. So that's 6 adults in all. What were those influences? I'd really like to know, please. Over to you. Thank you.
It was mostly my grandfather's, honestly. My grandfather, who I lived close to, he was very, very social. He never met a stranger. He would go up to people he didn't know, and he'd start asking them questions about themselves because he was very interested in people's stories. And he'd look them in the eye, and he was very polite, but he was very interested and intense. And they loved it. They loved talking to him. And everywhere we went, he would talk to people, complete strangers, and they just loved it. They could not get over how kind he was and how nice he was and things like that. And I grew up watching him just make friends with everybody and be truly interested in who they were as people and what their stories were. And then on the other side of the United States, my other grandfather was a preacher. And he had his own church. And so he was also a very engaging, kind, powerful man who again, really listened to people and wanted to help them. He would do anything to help people. He was very poor. They were very poor, and yet they would still give whatever they had to help other people. So yeah, I grew up watching my family's help anybody in need and really listen to people and take in to understand who they were.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And it seems, both your grandparents or grandpas for that matter was social in nature. Here's somebody who's walking up and talking to strangers. Another one is a preacher, and they're constantly again in touch with people. Was that a natural progression that made you have your own business, or how did that come about, Kristan? Over to you.
Actually, I was not as social as they were. I was an introvert. I was always just standing around them, being very quiet, watching them because I just didn't, I was scared to talk to people. I was very shy. Um, but for my own business, I thought that it would be easier than being in the corporate world where I really didn't know the rules. And it sounded like more comfortable to me because both of my grandparents, and my father, they all had their own. They all had their own businesses. So I was the first one in my family to go to college and to graduate. And both of my grandfathers lost their fathers at a very early age. So they had to quit school and they had to work to support the families. So they always had odd jobs, that were kind of like their own businesses. And then when the wars came along, they joined the military, they got training. And when they came home, they opened their own businesses. So one grandfather was an upholsterer. He would reupholster furniture and build furniture, and the other one was, again, a preacher, but also a mechanic. And he built his own tools. He would go to the store because they were so poor. He would go to the store and he would look at the tools, and then he'd go back home and he'd make them exactly. So he didn't have to buy them. So I always saw my family having their own business. And so when I was thinking about what I wanted to do for a living, it never occurred to me to go into the corporate world. I really just wanted to have like a store or whatever, just my own thing, be my own boss.
Right, and that was really going well for you. You were a business owner, and you've just admitted that you didn't really want to be in the corporate world. So, here is then, I'm sure, and I know for a fact that a pivot happened. Now, how did that ever happen, Kristan? You were a business owner, and then you suddenly doing things that you didn't want to do, like stepping into the corporate world, from being a business owner to stepping into, I don't know, technological business, or working for a corporate which is into technology. Please tell us the story and the inspiration behind that. Over to you.
Well, I had a golf store, and it was a retail golf store. So we sold golf clubs to people and they were used. This preceded eBay. eBay didn't exist then. So it's kind of funny. All the people who played golf, mostly men, they had all these golf clubs at their house that they were hiding from their wives. So what would happen is they'd play the golf club, it didn't work, and instead of going and getting lessons, they'd go and buy another club, or they'd buy another whatever. And they'd have to hide all of it from their wives, because their wives, if they knew how much money they were spending, they'd go bananas. So we opened a store, my business partner and I opened a store where they could bring those used clubs and trade them for newish clubs. They weren't exactly new. And it worked really well because they had no other place to go, right? And then it eventually became global. And after a while, we had enough extra money to sponsor caddies on the professional golf tour. So everybody always sponsored the player. So if you watch players today, they have all the logos and the names on their hats and their shirts and everything. And we were noticing that the caddies were on TV just as much as the players. So we went to a tournament and we hired 5 caddies of the top 5 players. And we said, could you please wear our hat and our shirt? And it went bananas. Everybody was calling our store. They'd see, our store name on their hats, and they were like, who is that? And so we had a really great time. And I'm really, really proud to say that before we did that, nobody sponsored caddies. And now today at the PGA, everybody sponsors the caddies, which is wonderful, because the caddies have a very, very hard life. They don't get any money if their players don't win. So it's rough, right? So I'm very, very proud of that. But yeah, we were doing really well. And then the big major golf manufacturers decided that, hey, why is this little tiny store in Oakland doing so well? Why are they selling our clubs? We want to sell our clubs. We want to make that money. So they opened online trading for people to trade their clubs into the company, and then they, sell it. And they had so much more money than we did, that our customers started going there instead of coming to us. And so they kind of took our business model and did it, invested a lot more money and did it better. And we just couldn't compete with that. So I had to get a job, right? I had to get a job to support the business. And I ended up calling a friend who I'd known for just all my life. And because my mom, it's hilarious. My mom and dad went to this retreat, this church retreat with their friends that they've known forever. And they were talking about their children. And of course, my mom said, "Hey, Chris is looking for a job." And her friend said, "Oh, that's funny, because Sharon's looking for somebody. My daughter's looking for somebody too." And they're like, "Oh, okay. Well, I'll have Chris call Sharon and da 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 da." And I just laughed. I'm like, "Mom, I don't know how to do what Sharon needs. Sharon needs somebody to run a website, to learn that knows HTML and coding and then JavaScript and Photoshop, and I pay somebody to do that, Mom." And she's like, "Oh, you're smart. You'll learn. Just call Sharon." I'm like, "Okay." So I called Sharon. I was like, "Hi, Sharon." And she's like, "Hey, can you do this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can do that. Do you know Java?" "Yeah, I know Java." I totally lied, completely lied. And she was like, "Okay, great. Well, can you start in 2 weeks?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I can start in 2 weeks." And she's like, "Great. Okay, see you then." And that was that. All of a sudden, I'm in Cisco. Yeah, and Cisco's huge, 65,000 employees worldwide. And I don't know anything that they want me to do. So I went running back to my store, and the person who ran my website, I sat down with them for a week and I learned everything that they could teach me, so that when I got there, I could do the job. But yeah, so that's how I got into Cisco. I basically lied my way in.
Well, no, to me, it seems like you actually learned on the hoof. You said yes, and you actually made it happen after that because you picked up the skills that were required. And in today's day and age, I think it is all about demonstration of your skills. If you know something, you've got the job. So to me, that is really enterprising. Well done, you, Chris. I am really
Thank you.
proud of you. Tell me something. So there's Sharon, and then obviously, you've gone and joined Cisco, and every day you're learning on the job. She's probably being and playing the role of your mentor. How was it like? How was that transition like from running your own golf store to then managing the website and maybe doing other things for such a huge organization? Tell us a little bit more about Sharon's mentorship, your transition, your journey, because I think it is very relevant, especially for women who are looking at a career in technology and STEM to get to know what works. So over to
Mhm.
you. Thank you.
Sharon worked in the workplace resources group. It was basically corporate real estate. So we handled all the employee services for all of our sites worldwide. So the website that I was managing had over 1 million hits per month, and so we were very, very busy trying to make sure that information was easy to find. It got to you very quickly, and it was accurate. Right. So we had a global team of people updating the website 24/7 to make sure all the employee services were accessible, very easily accessible. And Sharon was just wonderful. She was very calm. She never, got upset about anything. She had everything in perspective. Like if somebody, yeah, because working with employee services, you're never going to win. They only come to you when they want to complain. They never tell you the things you're doing well. It's always about all the things you're doing wrong. So it was a hard group to be in, but she always kept her sense of humor. She always had perspective. She said, "We're never going to hear about the stuff we do right. We're always going to hear about the stuff we do wrong. It's not a big deal. We'll fix it. Just acknowledge and listen to them, let them vent. Don't take it on personally, and then let's get on with it." So it was a very nice place to land with a very rational, calm, practical boss. and she was wonderful. And eventually she ended up moving on to a better position within the company. And she and I took over her spot. So I was running the global team after she left. And I did it in the same way that she did because she was so very successful. And it just taught me a lot about, when something's on fire in front of you, yes, you have to take care of it, but you have to keep it in perspective with the bigger picture of, this is just one little tiny thing. Everything else is going well. Just stay calm, get it taken care of, and move on to the next. So she was quite a pleasure to work for, and she always encouraged us to go out and do interesting new things, always look for new ways of doing things. And when I started running the team, it's interesting. Her husband was laid off from his job, and he was an excellent web developer. I mean, he was all the magic behind the scenes, you know. And I was more design and content, and he was all the magic. And so she said, my husband got laid off. Could he be a contractor here for a little while until he finds a new job? And I said, absolutely, because I knew her husband as well. And I said, yeah, he's great, perfect. And we ended up hiring him full time, and he's still there. And it's close to 15 years later, maybe more, but he's still there because it was an amazing a collaboration. So I would say, hey, he was also a stickler for rules. It used to drive me nuts. So I'd be like, hey, Larry, what if we did this? And he's like, we can't do that because it's against the rules. They want us to keep, the CSS sheets this way, so we can't do it. And I'm like, yeah, but if we could, it would do this. And he's like, okay, let me think about it. And then he'd say, okay, we can't do this, but we can do this. And I'm like, okay, if we can do that, then what if we do this? And he's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then we could do that. And so we would create things that didn't exist, just because we bounce off each other constantly. And eventually we got several awards within the company for being innovative. And some of the things that we did create, they implemented as global standards for the internal website for Cisco. So it was a great collaboration, and it was just fun to always come to him and say, I want to do this, and him say, you can't do that. And I'm like, yeah, 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 we can. They'll never know. And he's like, yes, they will. But it was a fun collaboration, and we got a lot of really innovative, fun stuff done.
Brilliant. To me, this sort of exhibits and shows that you did pick up your social skills and your collaborative skills from both your granddads. So well done you again.
Thank
Because
you.
you rightly said it is all about communication. It is all about the collaboration going on between first Sharon and you, and then Larry and you. Great. So life was going really well, and you're sort of doing all this innovative work that you're being awarded for, and so on and so forth. Why did the pivot number two, that is leaving Cisco for the next company, how and why did that come about? Please take us through that journey and those emotions a little bit. Chris, over to you.
So I hired a consultant to do some communications work within the team, within the corporate real estate team. And he was very savvy, business savvy, unlike me. I was not, right? So he was very business savvy. And he said to me one day, he said, you've been in this group at Cisco for over 8 years now. Perhaps you should show people you can do something else. And I was like, well, why would I do that? I love this group. I love what I'm doing. And he's like, yeah, but no one's ever going to think you can do anything else if you don't. And I thought about it, and I was like, okay. So I had heard from somebody that this woman who was a senior vice president at the company, she was head of global policy and government affairs. She was looking for a chief of staff. And I thought, well, I don't know anything about policy or government, but I could do that. And so it's Cisco, when I was there back then, the culture was such that you kind of had to sneak around to do interviews outside your group because people didn't like people leaving their groups. it was kind of frowned upon. So I went to her office for my interview, but I was in my work clothing, not my interview clothing. And so I was apologizing. I said, I'm sorry, I couldn't wear my nice suit because I didn't want them to know I was interviewing. And she's like, oh, don't worry about it. It's fine. And so we had a good talk. And she finally said, Kristan, why do why do you think you'd be successful in this group with this job? And I said, well, I said, you said that you need to get stuff done, and I get stuff done. I mean, you can't, yeah, I get a lot of stuff done. And she's like, oh, okay, except they didn't use the word stuff. And she was like, okay, okay. Well, nice talking to you. And I left, and I was like, oh, I bombed that. I'm never going to hear from her again. And a couple days later, she offered me the job. And so I moved out of corporate real estate into global policy and government affairs. And that's where I met, like, it was a whole different world. I mean, we were going to Washington, D.C., we went to Moscow, we went everywhere. And we met with diplomats I mean, we met the president of Russia, Medvedev. I mean, we did very big public grand things. We were always in the EBC. We were always with the CEO. John Chambers was in a lot of our meetings. We had senators at our place. We had the governor of California, Arnold Schwarzenegger, several times at our company doing EBC. Yeah, Executive Briefing Center, EBCs. We call them EBCs, but they're customer meetings. So it was a very different life for me. I had to learn very quickly how to act around diplomats, how to act around royalty, actually. What I could not do, what I could not say, where I had to stand, when I was allowed to sit. And then on top of it was all the chief of staff duties. On top of that was all the communication. So it was almost like going to business school. Honestly, I learned so much, and I was always watching and learning, and I didn't say a lot. So I guess my natural inclination to be introverted helped me in that way. But also, yeah, it was definitely a learning time for me, and it was fascinating. So she ended up becoming one of my mentors, and I followed her from government affairs at Cisco to starting a brand new business unit within Cisco called the Smart Grid Business Unit, which was an amazing experience. It was like building our own brand new business from the ground up within the company. And then eventually she left that Smart Grid Business Unit once it was up and running, and we had products and we had customers and everything. And she went to Microsoft to run their public sector sales. So, like me, she was learning something new too. She had never run sales before. She had just run a policy group, but now she was running sales, and it was a $13 billion business for Microsoft. So, and it included healthcare, teaching, police, first responders, things like that, and then of course government officials. So it was a very big new job for her as well. So both of us kind of like looked at each other and we're like, okay, guess we're gonna do this. So again, we went into something that we really didn't know, and just went for it.
Brilliant. It is all about taking risks. Only then can we sort of take off, and then who knows where we will land. So, absolutely fascinating and amazing question right there. So, that sort of makes me think, um, how come the move into diversity, and then how did Informatica happen to you? Tell us down that memory, or rather, take us down that memory lane, please. Over to you.
So the diversity thing happened at Cisco mostly. My mentor in government affairs, she was also like the head of a executive board, and it was called the Cisco Women's Advisory Group. And it was a board of executives across the company globally who decided what our diversity efforts would be, what our inclusion efforts would be, things like that. And when I started working for her, she was like, oh, great, now you can run the board. You can program manage the Cisco Women's Advisory Group. To be totally honest, I really didn't want to run the Cisco Women's Advisory Group. I had no interest in it. I thought that, if you worked hard enough, you'd have access to everything like everybody else does, right? But that wasn't the case. When I started running the group, because, I couldn't say no to her, she was my boss. When I started running the group, I found out just how difficult things are for women in the corporate world. I found out how times 10 difficult they are for women of color in the corporate world. And it was a real eye-opening experience for me. I didn't expect that. I just thought that everybody works hard, everybody gets, access to opportunities. If you don't make it, it's because you didn't try hard enough, and that wasn't the case. That wasn't the case at all. So I'm very grateful to her for opening my eyes to that. Unfortunately, when I first started as the program manager, we'd have these women groups, that were all set up, and we'd have these women executives come to the groups, and it kind of started out as like these complaint sessions. Like everybody would sit in these beautiful rooms at the Cisco buildings, and they'd all complain about men. And I would sit there and I'd laugh because I'm like, the men aren't here. They can't hear you. So by complaining to each other, you're not getting anywhere. What and I went into fix it in action mode because I just could not stand listening to them complain anymore. So I created a whole bunch of different programs. And one of the programs was called BAM, BAM. So bring a man. So this event was, we would get amazing speakers. Like I went to the head of sales for North America and I said, I need some women CEOs to come in and speak to our group. Who do you got? And he's like, okay, well, Ursula Burns is going to be here. And she's the CEO of, I can't think of it right now. It might be UPS. I'm not quite sure though. But anyway, first a Black CEO woman. She's amazing. So I was like, great, great. So I worked with her team and we brought her in, and it was our first BAM event, and you could not get in unless you brought a man. So all the women had to go find a guy within Cisco and bring in order to get into the event and to listen to Ursula. And she gave everybody such a wonderful keynote and so many good tips for leadership and being a woman in the industry and being a Black woman in the industry. It was fascinating. So it kind of started off with a big bang. And then we just kept having bigger and bigger people. And even our CEO would pop in every now and again and talk to everybody and give them advice. And it was great. It was a lot of fun. So that's how I got started in all the inclusion and diversity efforts. And once I did get started in it, I just didn't want to stop. I could see the difference it was making when the guys were like, oh, I didn't know women, didn't think like this. I didn't know. And the communication started flowing. It was really powerful, and it was really powerful to see. I also created a program where we sponsored high potential women to get from senior manager to director, which was a really hard thing to do at Cisco. And out of 50 women, I think we got almost 35% of them over that hump just the first year, just by having sponsors and having the executives up the chain understand how women work and how they work differently than men. So it was fun, and it was powerful to see the change and the understanding.
Absolutely fantastic anecdote right there with so many takeaways and learnings. For me personally, what stood out was sponsorship, a lot of communication, and then the will to actually execute or do things about things you care about. Great. Thank you so much for that, Kristan. Tell us, how did Informatica happen to you, please? Take us down that story because I mean, you're again comfortable and you're working, you Cisco and Microsoft policy group diversity. Informatica, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so it was 3 years at Microsoft, and my mentor decided she was going to go to Oracle and do something there that was different. And I was really tired of commuting from Oakland, California to Washington State. I was on a plane every other week, and I was away from my family a lot. So I decided I wanted to leave and get a job that was something I could drive to and not have to get on a plane to. So I worked at Cisco for a while as a consultant. Just went back for fun. And I actually got to work for Padmasree Warrior. I'm sure you know of Padma. And we had a great time for like, I don't know, almost a year. We just, we went everywhere. We did a lot of speeches. We did a lot of keynotes and fireside chats and things like that. So that was such a wonderful time, and I learned so much from her. She's such an amazing woman. This is a funny fact that a lot of people don't know about her. When she was first starting out at one of her first jobs as a female engineer, she looked so young that none of the men would take her seriously. They would just ignore her. They would talk over her. They wouldn't include her in meetings, that type of thing. So she actually went home and dyed her hair gray, and she came back to the office so she'd look older. And they, I guess at work, they started taking her more seriously. I just laughed when I heard that. But yeah, she actually dyed her hair gray, so she'd be taken more seriously. I don't suggest that, but it was kind of funny. It was a funny story to see what she had to do. But yeah, so, and then Padma told me, I'm leaving the company. I'm going to a different place to do different stuff. And I was like, oh, well, I don't want to stay if you're leaving. So I went, yeah, and then it just so happens that a friend of mine who used to work at Cisco called me up, and she was the CIO at Informatica. And she's like, hey, I need your help. I need you over here. We'd have a lot of fun. Come and join me. And so I went to talk to her, and I, joined. And so I joined in 2015, and I think about October, and by January or February, she came to me and she said that she had to leave. For personal reasons, she had to leave. And it was like, what? I just got here. We were going to do a lot of great things. And so this was actually the first time where I stayed when the person I came to work for left. I didn't do that. Usually I left too. But this time I was like, let's see what happens. And I felt a responsibility to the company to help whatever new CIO that came in get on their feet and learn and have a stable environment to be a leader in. So I stayed at the company. I had 3 or 4 CIOs my first 6 months, and then the current CIO, Graham Thompson, he came in and stayed. He's still here. So I promised I would stay. I promised myself I'd stay at least a year to make sure that Graham was successful and the team didn't lose anything, and that, such as that. So that's why I stayed, and then I just ended up staying.
Again, fascinating and good for you. And that sort of brings me to the logical question of what is it like for women working at Informatica? What are the opportunities? What kind of an environment? And what goes on for say, an associate or an engineer or in the leadership? Please fill us in, will you, Kristan? Thank you.
Informatica is a great company. We're very small compared to a Cisco or a Microsoft. We only have a little over 5,000 people globally, half of which are in India. We have over 2,100 people in India at 3 different locations. So we how do I put? It's a really great company. We're going through a very big transformation right now. When I started, we were on-prem. We were an on-prem software company. Now we're, in the cloud, and we're subscription. And it's a huge transformation, which I'm proud to say Graham led for the company. But it was successful. But we're still going through it. And now we're even going through a bigger transformation with inclusion and diversity and equality and belonging. We're creating a culture of inclusion and diversity where people really feel like they belong together with the leadership team. So it's an amazing, when people ask me why they should come to work for Informatica, I always tell them because there's so much opportunity. If you see something at the company, whether you're a man or a woman, it really doesn't matter. If you see something where you're like, I want to do that, that's broken, I want to fix that, they'll let you. They'll be like, okay, fine, yeah, good, go fix it, do whatever you got to do. And you get to learn, you get to go do different things, you can volunteer for things. And I don't know a lot of companies that are like that, because we're small and because we're transforming. there are opportunities to learn new things. Whereas and that's one thing I really loved about the IDEB role. We call it IDEB, Inclusion, Diversity, Equality, and Belonging. The IDEB role, it was make it what you want it to be, grow it the way you want to grow it, and it's greenfield. You get to do whatever as employees, and I'm saying not me, but the employees, we get to build what we want. And that's what an opportunity, because at a place like Cisco or a place like Microsoft, they're very locked in. They've been there, they've done it, and they have everything established, and you just kind of fit into that. You're like, oh, you already do that. Okay. And well, what about this? And sometimes they're open to new ideas and sometimes they're not. But Informatica is very open to new ideas. And so I think that's, for me, that's the number one reason why I like working here, is because if there's a situation that I think needs to be fixed, I can go solve it. I can get resources and I can go solve it, or I can just solve it myself without any resources, right? So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, we really do treat each other fairly and well. I mean, there's a lot of respect for each other at the company. When you ask people at Informatica, why do you work here? Why have you been here so long? They always say the people. So it's a very tight knit kind of group of people, that are kind of family in a way. So and like with family, it's not always perfect, but everybody does pretty much support each other, and there's not a lot of, there's healthy discussion, but there's not anything mean or anything like that. So it's a really, really good company to be at. Plus, and then if you look at it from a business standpoint, our products are the number one in all of their categories. So that's pretty exciting. So, we spend a lot of money on R&D, and we have very, very smart people in that group who create these products. And as a result, we have to get very, very smart salespeople who can sell it, because it's highly complicated. So it's a bunch of smart people too, a bunch of very smart people with good products.
Brilliant. And tell me something, Kristan. This focus, extreme, or I would say so laser sharp focus on inclusion and belonging, is that a top down approach, or is that a all over, all permeating approach? Why is this company so inclusive, and why do the people feel the way they feel? What is the culture like? I would just like to understand from an ally and a layman, outsider perspective. Over to you. Thank you.
So the why, I'm not sure of the why. I mean, the culture was kind of set when I got there. So, and I had to learn the culture, just like you always have to do in a new role. But when we got a new CEO, well, the first thing that happened is we got a woman on our board of directors named Janice Chapin. And so one of my colleagues, reached out to her and said, hey, would you come talk to us about inclusion and diversity? Because she actually taught about inclusion and diversity at college, at a university in Southern California. So she came, and she, to this volunteer group of people, about 30 or 40 people. And she was talking to us about inclusion, diversity, and we had never had in the history of the company any head of inclusion, diversity, or any questions about it in our employee survey or anything like that. We were just chugging along, making products, selling products, making products, selling products, not, that part wasn't really important at that point. And she suggested, why don't you guys make a tiger team or something and see what you can do? So the people who went to that meeting, who were very passionate about this topic, said, yeah, let's do it. So we created this IDEB steering committee. And we had all volunteers from all different parts of the company, and we'd meet every week. And we started coming up with, what did we want our vision to be? What did we want our pillars to be? What did we want our goals and our focus areas to be? And then, at the same time, HR was looking for a head of inclusion and diversity. So we were all under the impression that we were going to create the framework, and then we were just going to hand it over to the head of inclusion and diversity and say, okay, go. If you need us, let us know, but here you go. And one thing led to another, and we ended up getting after we did all of this, we're in the middle of it, we got a new CEO. Our previous CEO left, and we have Amit Walia, who used to be the head of products of R&D for the company. So eventually, the chief human resources officer, I went to go talk to her about the stuff that I did at Cisco, and she's like, "Why don't you, apply for the job?" And I was like, "Me? No, I can't apply for the job." She's, "No, no, no. Why don't you try?" I said, "Okay." I said, "But I really want to know that the CEO is behind this. If he's not behind it, then I don't want the job, because I just don't think anyone can be successful without the leadership really believing that this is important." And she's like, "Okay, that's fair." So when I had my interview with him, he was all over it. He wants it to be his legacy. He wants it to be a part of our DNA. It's very important to him. It was so inspiring to me, or inspirational, to hear that from him. And he really meant it, right? It wasn't words. It wasn't marketing. He really meant it. So I said, okay. So, luckily I'm very happy I got the job, and we still have the steering committee because, I was on it anyway. So let's just keep it. So, yeah, it's driven by our board of directors and our CEO, frankly, but it's defined by and built by our employees. So it's tops down and it's bottoms up. And I think you kind of have to have both, especially when you're starting off from ground zero.
Brilliant, absolutely fascinating to hear. When the leadership already has a buy-in, then how much of a difference can that make? And at this point, I would like to pull up Amit Singh's comment right here. And he goes, "My niece in turn got hired last year. She spoke highly about the recruitment process and how the recruitment leader made them feel comfortable during induction. They called the parents, and that was so nice." Thank you, Amit, for that testimonial. And that brings in my now. So, Kristan, what are the other opportunities for people at Informatica? Inclusion, equity is such a huge umbrella, and especially now with the IDEB, and let me sort of expand that for inclusion, diversity, equity, and belonging for the audience. What are the kind of opportunities can, say, maybe women, veterans, other silos of the equity and inclusion pillars can look at and can have as a career option at Informatica? It's over to you. Thank you.
The first thing is that we believe at the company that fits our culture is inclusion is very important. Without inclusion, or a sense of belonging, no matter what diversity you have at the company, is not going to be fully utilized or kept within the company, if you don't have an inclusive culture. So the first thing we're really, really working on as leaders and as colleagues and as team members is how to be inclusive, how to be an inclusive colleague, how to be an inclusive leader, like not letting the things that happen to Padma happen in our meetings. So if you're an intern or a senior vice president, everybody has the same amount of respect for each other. Everybody treats each other with the same amount of dignity. That's very important for us. And then secondly, what's important is diversity, bringing in diversity. And diversity is always very customized to either the geography or the team or the function, because one size does not fit all. Some teams need to have more women. Some teams need to have more men. Some teams need to have people that are a little bit older on the team because it might be all very young people, to provide that balance and the different perspectives. So, and then obviously, that applies to ethnicity and other factors as well. So as a leader at Informatica, we're asking you to look at your team and say, all right, what can I do to bring in more diversity to my team? And really have a customized plan that you work out with your HR business partner or me or whomever, and then you strategize and work towards those customized diversity goals. So that's kind of where we're at right now, is really building this inclusive culture where people can bring their entire selves to work. They don't have to hide certain parts of themselves, or they don't have to pretend they're one thing when they're really not, because that's so tiring and it's so depressing to have to pretend that you say, for example, everybody golfs on the team and you have to pretend that you like to golf, just to be a part of the team. That's not what we're looking for. We want the person who likes to play tennis, and have everybody play golf except the person who likes to play tennis, and it's just as fine. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. So and it's working well. We have a lot of very enthusiastic people who are really excited about this and are pushing it forward, throughout the company. So some of the things that we're doing, for example, like in India, I know the team is way ahead of the team in North America. They've just done so many creative and impactful programs. Yeah, they really have. They are a shining star and an example for us, for sure. But they have programs like this LinkedIn session. They have Diversity Hiring Day. They have sourcing jams. They have Elevate, and it's a return to work program for women, specifically for women who have gone out of the workforce and want to come back in again. And then they have a program called HER Talks, HER Talks. And those are when women technologists give overviews of our products and how they work. So that's pretty exciting too. So they've done so many things, and they just launched a program called IDEB Change Champions. So people from each part of the business in India, they all meet together. They volunteer to be an IDEB Change Champion. They all meet together, and they're kind of like their own steering committee. Like, what's going on? What's the voice of the employee? What do they want to see? How are we going to deliver it? How are we going to make those type of things? So it's a very active community, and they're already putting together, pardon me, programs in India in addition to everything else that we're doing. And so it's very active right now, very, very active. And in North America, we're doing a lot of things as well. One of the things is globally that we're doing are employee resource groups. Pardon me. We just established them. They're volunteer led. The employees volunteer, pardon me, to lead the groups.
Would you like to, just take a sip of water,
Thank
please?
you.
Thank you. Yeah.
The employees, I'm so excited about this. I'm all choked up. Employees volunteer to lead the groups, and then they find an executive champion to sponsor the group, and then the group comes alive. And the first group that was launched was the Informatica Black Resource Group, or IBRG, which is so exciting. We also have Women at INFA. The Indian team has WINFA groups, of course, because they're ahead of us as usual. We're trying to establish WINFA in North America, WINFA chapters in North America as well. We also have a group for our Latinx employees called Somos Informatica, with C or CSI. So and they're going to focus a lot. They're going to focus on 3 different areas. They're going to focus on themselves, their own professional development, right? And then they're going to focus as a group because it's cross-functional, which is great. All these people are from all different teams at the company in all different geographies, right? They're going to focus on business problems, like one business problem to solve, because that's what we really, really want to, in the end, we have to make progress on our business. We have to be innovative. This is the whole point of diversity and inclusion, right? Is to be ahead of your competitors and do things better. So they're going to be working on business problems as well. And then the third thing is, when they get more mature and they get their legs under them, they're going to be working in the community too, to help people who don't have the same opportunities that they do. So we're going to use our privilege and our strengths to help other people who don't have the same opportunities we do. So it's exciting. There's a lot going on.
Absolutely. And here is, I also keep hearing about this diversity codeathon challenge. Most recently, in the last couple of days, I've been hearing a lot about that. Would you share a little bit more about that, please? Over to you, Kristan. Thank you.
Yeah. I've been hearing a lot about it as well. And I think it's so exciting to really encourage women to to really dive in and be a part of the technology at the company in this very clever and fun way. I mean, who doesn't like a contest? Who doesn't like to like jump in and see if they can, win something? And especially like an air book. That's huge. I want to win an air book. I can't code, but I want to win an want to win an air book. So I think it's just another example of the India team being very clever and very thoughtful about getting the women into our company that we need to have the diversity to really, just be more than competitive, but to win.
Absolutely. Spot on. And, well done with that. Here is another comment, and here it is from Dr. Grace Sampson. From your India team, she goes, we want to ensure Informatica lives IDEB as a culture, makes inclusion a habit and not an annual goal or a measurement on the scorecard. Well said, Grace. Absolutely aligned to everything that I've been hearing in the past 50 minutes or so. Thank you for sharing about that codeathon, which happens to be the diversity codeathon, which will happen in India in the month of June. There are 2 legs. More information is available on the Informatica website and also in the comment section of this talk. This has been a brilliant and amazingly insightful session. So, Kristan, before we actually log off, are there any tips, tricks, advice that you would like to share with the audience today? It could be anything. It could be career in STEM, it could be equity inclusion, anything that you can think of that will make working or your work space or place rather a joy to come to and not really look like work. Over to you. Thank you.
Yeah. I think that for it to be a joy, it has to be something that you really, really enjoy, something that you feel passionate about, something that makes you happy, something that brings you satisfaction beyond just money or a paycheck. Um, Money or a paycheck gets old. And please don't. I'm not saying that I'm not grateful for my paycheck, and I'm not grateful for all the paychecks I got in my lifetime. That's not it at all. And we've all taken jobs where we had to because we were in a poor situation, and when we had to make money to survive. So that's I've been in both places. I've had to take jobs to survive, as we talked about, and then I've also been able to be in jobs where I'm enjoying what I'm doing, like right now, and the difference is humongous. So if you have the opportunity to do something that you truly enjoy, take it. Just take it, because the opportunities as a result of your joy and your enthusiasm and everything else, the opportunities will come faster for you rather than if you're in a position where you're making more money, perhaps, but you're not as happy. People notice that. They notice that, and you're not as alive and your energy's different, right? So I would definitely say always, if you can, if you have the luxury and the opportunity, take the roles that fill you up from a happiness standpoint and a joy standpoint, and motivate you and get you excited. I would also say from a day-to-day standpoint, I think you should. I learned that always do more than what's expected, because you absolutely never know who's watching. Like I would, for example, I would go down to the meeting center at Cisco, and I would make sure the meeting rooms, when we had people coming in, were set up perfectly. Now, we had staff to do this, but I never trusted them to do it, exactly the way I wanted it. So I always would go down and I would make sure it was absolutely perfect. And one day I was down there and I was making sure all the pens were straight and that this was making sure everything was perfect. And my CEO was at the door. John Chambers was at the door watching me. And I had no idea until I looked up and then I'm like, oh, yeah. Oh, hi. You know, he's like, go ahead, go ahead. And I just, so you never really know who's watching. So I would say always do more than what's expected. And then I would also say volunteer for everything. You know, if somebody needs help over here, volunteer for it. If somebody needs help over there, volunteer. You never know what you're going to find. It might be something that you really love that you never thought of, right? Or it might be something where you go, oh my God, I never want to do that again, you know, but it's knowledge. So I would say those three things: find your joy, do more than what's expected, and volunteer for everything.
Brilliant nuggets of information right there and total gems. But I will not leave you until and unless I've asked you one final tips, tricks, advice for all the young girls and women, the young students who are from 18 years to 21, 25-year-old, the young professionals, especially women from 0 to 5 years. What would be your pieces of advice for this particular segment from your own experiences, please? Over to you. Thank you.
Oh, you know, uh, oh yeah. I think it'd be twofold. It would be, don't let people dismiss you because you're young or you're inexperienced. Because when you're in a room listening to how things are done and how things have been done in the past, and you bring in that fresh perspective and you can connect dots and you can go, huh, they used to do it this way, they did it this way, but I've seen it done this way, or I think it should do this way, or blah, blah, blah. That is what they're paying you for. That is why you're there. So speak up. And if they don't hear you, speak up again. And if they try and speak over you, just very politely say, can I please finish? You know, to just a very sweet, polite reminder, shut up. I'm going to talk because I know what I'm saying. And then on the flip side, don't take it personally when they don't take your advice, right? Just keep going, keep believing in yourself, because sometimes there's a reason that they cannot take your advice and they just don't have time to tell you about it, or whatever. But it will happen. They will start taking your advice and they will appreciate that you're always in there, you're always giving ideas, you're always, present. So don't let it discourage you. Always, always, always stand up for your voice in the most polite and respectful way you can, but always stand up for your voice. Do not let them silence you. And then the second thing is, every opportunity is a learning opportunity. Every opportunity. It doesn't matter where you are, what you're doing. Sometimes it's an opportunity for you to speak, and other times it's an opportunity for you to just listen and learn fast, because we pick up stuff. Women can do 70,000 things at once. So we pick up stuff very quickly. So use that skill to learn and connect dots. I joke that, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, So I would say definitely don't let them silence you, but also listen, 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 and learn.
Absolutely brilliant. And I couldn't have asked for a better piece of advice to end this amazingly brilliant and insightful session. So, as this is the end of this conversation. You have been watching Corporate Spotlight. Today's spotlight was shining on Informatica Inc. And my guest and my dear friend here is Kristan Gainey Keene, who is the Senior Director of Diversity at Informatica Inc. USA. We were talking about women in STEM and everything else in between of Kristan's life. So allow me and Kristan to say, stay safe, stay well. Until the next time, Jai Hind. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kristan.
Thank you. Thank you.